All right, welcome everybody to the Jim Acosta Show. It is Wednesday, and Trump really, really wants everybody to stop talking about this free plane he wants to accept from the Qataris, and he really, really wants you to think it's all legal when it's not. As you can see on screen with me, my first guest is Ruth Ben-Ghiat. She is a renowned expert around the world on authoritarianism, and Ruth, a frequent guest of mine on my old show and hope to have her as a frequent guest here as well. Ruth, great to see you again. Thanks so much for joining us.
Sure, glad to be talking about this. Corruption is the topic of the hour.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it seems that this is one where maybe people can't understand the crypto thing quite as well, and I get that it's complicated. But a free plane from the Qataris, I just feel like is something everybody can understand. And you have people like Ted Cruz coming out of the woodwork criticizing this, wondering how this works from a national security standpoint. But to me, I sort of wonder whether this will sink in with just regular everyday Americans who just don't want to see the president of the United States selling out the White House. I mean, he was on Truth Social, his favorite forum for lying, and he said the Boeing 747 is being given to the United States Air Force Department of Defense, not to me. When the White House said no, it's going to his presidential library or whatever it's going to be called. Maybe it'll be a casino at the same time after he leaves office. And he's just flat out lying about this. His hand has been caught in the Qatari cookie jar, I guess.
Yeah, and well, the symbolism, it's not none too subtle, of seeing the President of the United States flying around and giving the status of Air Force One to a foreign plane. It
Yeah.
kind of brings home the idea, even if you don't follow corruption, that this president could be bought, that he's not wholly our president. He's flying in a foreign plane.
Yeah.
And of course, there are national security, huge national security issues, which this administration is very loose with,
Mm.
has rolled back a lot of protections against infiltration by Russia and China. They're I would say, willfully, almost like lowering down the gates of the fortress of national security in many, many ways, including by appointing Tulsi Gabbard, who, parrots the Kremlin sometimes. And so this is apparently not a big concern of President Trump, that there are national security problems, but the symbolism of him flying around in a foreign plane that was gifted to him personally just kind of says it all if you study what I study, which is the personalization of power.
Right. And talk about that. Why is that important? And what is it about? I mean, you and I've talked about this before. He craves the trappings of an authoritarian dictator. And so he feels right at home in this part of the world.
He does, and we often have the focus on Russia, rightfully so, for many
Yeah.
years. But there are other players, and in fact, a mainstay of U.S. foreign policy has been to cozy up to the Saudis because of oil. And the Saudis and the Gulf states are making a huge bid right now to kind of whitewash themselves and present themselves as players. And we know that Trump, the people he has always admired are autocrats, whether it's communists like Xi Jinping or, the Gulf states, the Saudis. And so he wants to associate with them. And so we're seeing a reorientation of foreign policy to doing deals with them. But because he's an authoritarian, authoritarians do not kind of see a divide between public and private.
Mm.
Everything is theirs in the sense that they don't see public office as serving the public. Government becomes a tool to enrich themselves privately, enrich their families and their cronies. It's a totally different mentality.
Yeah. And I've traveled, I mean, covering presidential trips with Obama and Trump, and you go to places like China or Saudi Arabia. I mean, you're clearly not visiting a democracy where people have personal freedoms. And, in Saudi Arabia in particular, I mean, this is a place that is led by Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince. And he is somebody who presided over the murder of a Washington Post journalist, Jamal Khashoggi. And to hear Trump lavishing praise on MBS as he did during this trip, I thought was very disturbing. And at one point, Trump says to MBS, Mohammed, do you sleep at night? How do you sleep? Critics doubted that it was possible what you've done, but over the past 8 years, Saudi Arabia has proved the critics totally wrong. He's your greatest representative, he said to the audience there. And if I didn't like him, I'd get out of here so fast. He says, I like him a lot. I like him too much. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, some of those were, I mean, it's just sort of over the top, lavishing praise, way beyond what a president of the United States. I mean, it sounds like maybe sort of the head of a company that goes down there looking to drum up business, not the
Mm-hmm.
president of the United States. But every once in a while, Trump says something that, I say, for as dishonest as he is, he can be remarkably candid, even accidentally
Yes.
so. But when he says to
Yes.
MBS, how do you sleep at night? I kind of have the same question. How do you sleep at night?
Yeah, and it's important to remember that Jamal Khashoggi was murdered not only because he criticized the Saudis in general, he also was looking into the corruption. And corruption,
Right.
there's 100 years of victims of authoritarian states. One of the most dangerous things you can do is be looking into their corruption. That's actually what
Mm,
had Alexei Navalny
question of all.
killed, and his mentor Boris Nemtsov. They weren't just opposition politicians, they were anti-corruption researchers. And, and Trump is at his most candid sometimes when he's talking about his feelings toward these autocrats. Something that literally I thought about this like for a whole day and a half when he had his infamous meeting between quotes with Vance and Zelensky in the Oval Office.
Right.
And after he said, Putin had to go through things with me about the Russia investigation. It was though he was feeling guilty. He put Putin through this terrible stuff and he was failing as a partner and now he had to make up for it. And so the same with MBS. He's like, I like him too much. That's why I'm giving him so much because they're
Mm,
doing all these defense deals and there's implications for intelligence, all kinds of things. And so it's almost like he professes weakness in these moments, but to sell himself personally and sell the United States to these autocrats as like reliable partners who will do their bidding. It's very
yeah.
chilling, actually.
Yeah, it is. And one summit attendee, this is in Saudi Arabia, told CNBC, Trump and MBS, it's a bromance for the ages. I mean, to me, it's that that pretty much typifies things. But Ruth, the other thing that has been going on is the Trump family has been cutting these business deals left and right after their father's return to power. The AP reporting that Eric Trump has announced plans for an 80-story Trump Tower in Dubai, the
Yeah.
UAE's largest city. He also attended a recent cryptocurrency conference there with Zach Witkoff, a founder of the Trump family crypto company, World Liberty Financial. He's also the son of Trump's envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff. And
Mhm.
so all these business dealings, as tacky as they seem and appear to the public, I mean, they also have the feel of what goes on in sort of two-bit banana republics,
Mhm.
where the people who it's an oligarchy.
Mhm.
Yeah,
So it's an oligarchy, and again, the
yeah,
purpose of being in office is twofold. One is to protect yourself from prosecution, but the reason you need to do that is because you've got all these dirty deals. And so
yeah,
making these deals for Trump hotels and real estate, that's the Trump family business. That's obviously conflict of interest, but authoritarians don't even recognize the idea of conflict of interest.
right.
And the other thing to say about this is I have a part in Strongman, which I added a corruption chapter to that book because
Mm,
as I did the research, first I was like, okay, I'll have a chapter on propaganda and violence and personality cults, and then I realized that corruption was key to everything. And so it's not just the corruption of the leader. He has his inner sanctum, and there are always family members in there, and the family as a whole is enriched. And this has
mm,
happened with Viktor Orban, who's the muse of the GOP in Hungary. Hungary's been impoverished during his 14, 15 years in rule, but he's
mm,
become so spectacularly wealthy along with his family, his son-in-law, all the cronies, that there's a French documentary that just came out about this like crazy enrichment. And
wow.
so we're living through every time we read about this deal and then that deal, we're actually living through this process of enrichment off of public office.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this and wanted to bring this up in the context of our interview. And I'm glad you brought up Strongmen. It's a great book, and it's terrific that you've updated it to include corruption because it's a huge part of this. My concern is in all of this, Ruth, over these next few years, is that the Trump family and this MAGA orbit around Trump will enrich themselves to the point where it will be very difficult to dislodge them from power. It will make
Hmm.
it more difficult to dislodge
Hmm.
them from power because other people will get sucked into this
Right.
idea that government is for sale, the White House is for sale. You can enrich yourself in all of this if you just play ball and go along with us. And as you were just saying, it happens in other countries. And people who say, "Oh, that can't happen here," of course it can happen here. If you don't enforce the emoluments clause or some, things along those lines, if Congress isn't going to pass a law to stop this kind of stuff, of course it can happen.
Yeah, and you're
Yeah,
you're totally right,
yeah,
that this is indeed what happens is that the circle of those benefiting from the corruption widens. And so you've got all kinds of stakeholders who then become entrenched in the system, and then it's in their personal interest and business interest to keep the corrupt autocrat in power. And by the way, every time one of these deals is cemented, it exposes people if this is a corrupt deal because the president is not supposed to be doing this.
right.
And we don't know what's going on, for example, with all the crypto stuff because there's no transparency. So then those people get worried that they could be prosecuted. And so they need to keep the autocrat in power because then there won't be any prosecution because democratic processes of justice have been turned back. That's what happens like places like Turkey and Hungary. And so what you described is the perfect that's why it's so dangerous because they can perpetuate the system in a way.
Yeah. Yeah, and when these tech bros are down in the Middle East with Trump, when they're traveling
Yeah.
along with him, it creates this atmosphere, and it just looks un-American to
Yeah.
have these corporate titans tagging along with Trump as he's going on sort of this fill up my bag dictator tour of that region. Obviously presidents go on foreign trips, sometimes business leaders come and so on, but this just has a totally different feel and cloud
Hmm.
hanging over it. I mean, that's the problem that I have. Ruth, the last thing I wanted to get into with you, because it's been on my mind. I talked about this with Joaquin Castro yesterday. Is the cruelty that's being shown towards migrants during this mass deportation purge that's been going on in this country? People like Stephen Miller saying we're looking at getting rid of habeas corpus. Trump wants to get rid of due process for migrants. This is also a hallmark of an authoritarian country, is it not?
Yeah, I'm beyond words for the how upset I am at the scenes of these mask gangs basically who come and surround people, and you're just walking down the street or you're in your house and they bundle you into a black van and you're off. And that's exactly what authoritarian states do. That's what actually happens in Turkey, for example. You're just walking down the street either in a Turkish city or you're actually abroad if you seem to be a critic of the regime, or you just fall you've made the wrong social media post. The gangs come in their black attire and they get
Right.
you wherever you are. So this is so disturbing. And then we have the innovation of sending people off to some foreign gulag. So that's something that authoritarians don't often do. It's like a transnational repression. So it's all very disturbing, and it's another measure of where we're going.
Yeah. And the question has to be asked of Republicans. And I know that people will say, oh, they don't do anything, they won't stand up to him, and so on. Doesn't mean we can't ask the question.
Yep.
Where are they in all of this? Why aren't they do something about any of this? The New York Times has been saying just today the U.S. has sent migrants from Asia, the Middle East, and Africa to Panama and Costa Rica, including families with young children. The Trump administration is also in early talks with the Rwandan government to
Yeah.
send deportees to that Central African country. And this month, the U.S. made plans to send Laotian, Vietnamese, and Filipino migrants to Libya before backing down in the face of a court order. And one of the problems in all of this, Ruth, is that the tentacles are spreading in so many different directions that
Hmm.
even Democrats in Congress, even the courts, it's just hard. How do you play whack-a-mole with this?
Hmm.
That's part of
That,
this.
and that's by design.
Yeah,
And I just want to remind your viewers that the speed at which all this has happened is unprecedented. So if you
yeah,
feel like your head's exploding, there's a reason that this does not resemble even early Putin or early Erdogan, rulers who came in via election. And even after a coup, they immediately go after the political opposition, like after a coup. Like in the first, few days,
yeah.
people are in prison by the thousands, but they don't also attack all the federal agencies, the economy. They don't do this very often so quickly. So this is part of the problem you're describing.
Yeah. Well, Ruth, it's great to talk to you. Always appreciate it. I feel like we need to book some time where we can just really keep going and going. I didn't want to do that to you because I know you were just telling me before we got started, you had just finished grading your papers and all the schoolwork coming in from your students. And I didn't want to put too much on your plate, but really appreciate your time. Always enjoy our conversations. I hope we can do it again real soon.
Me too. Thanks so much, Jim.
All right. Good to see you, Ruth. All right. That's Ruth Ben-Ghiat, who to me is just a national treasure. The way she has been able to become basically a household name in this country because of the way she focuses on authoritarianism is hugely important. It's hugely important because I mean people might say, "Oh, this sort of thing it can never happen here," and so on. It is happening here right now when we're talking about sending migrants here, there, and everywhere, even countries not of their origin, as part of this immigration crackdown. We all have to pay attention. I want to bring in Dr. Rob Davidson next. You might remember Dr. Rob. Hey, Dr. Rob, good to see you.
Good to see you, Jen. Thanks for having me here.
It's been a while. I was just about to tell the viewers out there that folks, and you're all over the place, so people know you anyway. But for the folks who don't remember, you and I used to talk all the time during the COVID pandemic. You were a cable news fixture during that time. Everybody wanted to talk to you to get your take on all of this. And now we have a very different public health emergency, it seems, and it's self-created. It's sort of
Right.
like the self-created crisis in our financial markets with Trump and the tariffs. He's injected RFK Junior into our public health system. And just today, he was defending, this is according to the Washington Post, was defending his messaging on vaccines and amid a growing measles outbreak. Questions were going back and forth. Mark Pocan, the Democrat from Wisconsin, asked Kennedy if he would vaccinate his own child against measles. Kennedy paused before answering probably, but then he went on to say this: I don't think people should be taking medical advice from me. And he did not
Wow.
directly answer whether he would vaccinate his own children against chickenpox and polio today. So we have an anti-vax kook as the HHS secretary.
Yeah. Yeah. Your words, but I would have chosen the same words. And,
Okay,
I
I'll
think I
say it.
agree with
Yeah,
him. People
yeah,
should not take his medical advice. I agree. The problem is he put himself up for and was confirmed as the secretary of the health arm of the United States government, right?
yeah,
That is control of Medicare, Medicaid, is the kind of the biggest platform for public health messaging and policy in this country. And so he really can't take on that job and support the people he's supporting in roles like Surgeon General and CMS administrator, without expecting that people are going to look at his healthcare decisions and his rhetoric on healthcare issues and think that that is what they should be doing. Right? It makes it harder for patients and regular old citizens, but it makes it harder for us too as physicians trying to actually practice good medicine in the face of all this.
yeah. And I mean, I do want to talk about some of your concerns about some of the other picks in these other public health roles. But since we're talking about RFK Jr., I have to bring this up because people are bringing it up in the comments, and I knew this was going to happen, so I'm going to bring it up too.
Yeah.
I was going to say, here he goes again, RFK Jr. doing weird stuff in public parks. NBC News reporting, RFK Jr. posted photos of himself and his grandchildren swimming in waters known to be contaminated during a Mother's Day hike in Rock Creek Park. The National Park Service says you shouldn't do this due to high bacteria levels. Anybody who has lived in Washington, I think, for 2 weeks knows this. I grew up in the Washington, D.C. area. You're not supposed to swim in the Potomac River. You're not supposed to go in the creeks. These are public waterways through a big city. These are things he
Yeah.
should know as a
Yeah.
grown up and a
Yeah.
grandparent. And yet here we
Yeah.
are.
I mean, I was born in 1971, and this has been the case since 1971, right? They
Exactly.
have posted,
Me
it's
too.
posted, right? It's
Yeah.
posted there telling people this. So a couple of problems with this, right? It is a
Yeah.
health risk to he and his grandchildren. People can raise their children and grandchildren how they choose. No one
Yeah.
suggests otherwise. But to needlessly and recklessly endanger them, I mean, they talk about high coliform counts of bacteria. That's E. coli. If we
Yeah.
remember the Paris Olympics and triathletes coming out of the water vomiting because they were being told, well, if you want to compete, you got to swim in the Seine. And despite dumping all sorts of chemicals in, those levels were definitely above what they should have been. Well, these folks were competing at an Olympic level, like maybe their only time in their life. So they're like, hey, I'm going to take that risk.
Yeah.
This is a guy just out on a hike with his grandkids, taking this risk. So that's reckless. That's stupid. That's
Yeah.
needless. But then he's also again the head of HHS and posting this publicly. I mean, I will admit I don't always drive the speed limit. Okay, sometimes I go faster than I probably should. I always wear a seatbelt, but I understand driving faster has a higher risk of potentially getting in an accident, all that. I don't go crazy, maybe five over, seven over. I don't post pictures of that. I guess I'm saying it now, but this is
Yeah.
just, I'm also not the head of, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration or the Secretary of Transportation. And so
Yeah.
this guy's purportedly the mouthpiece for public health, and he's telling people this is okay. Don't worry
Yeah.
about what the National Park Service tells you. Don't worry about E. coli that can cause kidney failure and skin infections. Just do whatever you want, and the consequences be damned.
Yeah, I mean,
Crazy.
and our buddy Mike Fanone just chimed in with a comment as the comments are coming in, said he pees in that water. So that, all the more reason. But my
Right?
thought was maybe RFK Jr. was fishing for another brainworm. I don't know. But,
I don't know.
this is somebody who has not made, good public health practices really, his
Right.
stock and trade in life. But I mean,
Yeah. And he's
yeah,
profited off of bad public health, right? He's profited off of his anti-vax messaging. And
right.
and so that's, I mean, he's supposedly, I would imagine, not profiting off of endangering himself and his grandkids, but again, just doing something stupid that can make other people sick.
Yeah.
It's hard to understand.
And I did want to ask you about this because I have not tackled this on the show. It is a interest of mine that I want to get into this MAHA movement, this Make America Healthy Again movement, which also I feel like at the end of the day is going to be some kind of grift. But anyway,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
are concerned about the nomination of Dr. Casey Means for Surgeon General. She's a
Yeah.
wellness influencer. Those words alone give me pause. But your thoughts?
Yeah, listen, Dr. Means, and she did graduate medical school. She gets to use that title. She
Yeah,
didn't finish a residency, and honestly, that's fine. I know
yeah,
people who didn't finish
sure,
residency. It
yeah,
wasn't for them. Essentially, you make the decision to go to med school around age 19 or so, and you start taking all the classes, and then you start residency sometime in your mid 20s, and people's, they change. They decide they don't want
yeah,
to. No problem. That's fine. Guess what?
sure,
You probably shouldn't be the head of the Public Health Commission Service Corps in the United States. You probably shouldn't be giving medical advice. We as doctors really do depend on the Surgeon General. C. Everett Koop, Reagan and Bush one Surgeon General, put the little warning on the box of cigarettes, right?
yeah,
Everyone knew they caused cancer. They called them cancer sticks, but they put the official seal of the top doc of the United States government on the cigarettes and said, these cause cancer, right? That led to fewer people getting cancer. Hopefully, that led to the lawsuits that really curbed the ability for cigarette companies to advertise to kids and to get them hooked early. This is a real job, an important job, and to put someone there who didn't, right, who didn't decided they didn't want to pursue that field, that's one negative. And the other to someone who then took their medical degree, the MD behind their name, and used that to peddle very strange views on medicine. I mean, I think she said everything has to do with good energy and bad energy, and rejects like an organ-based
yeah.
system of disease processes. I mean,
Is
we
that like good
we
humors from like the
yeah,
1800s and stuff?
you stole the words what I was just going to say.
Oh,
Like, we
sorry.
used to not know about the germ theory of disease. We thought
Yeah,
good humors, bad humors. You would bloodlet people, when they had the bad humors. And guess what? Science, research, public dollars and research financing helped us learn that that wasn't the case. And we got antibiotics and we got treatments for cancer and treatments for heart disease. In the past week, I've taken care of two people having acute heart attacks. Guess what? We had to put them on a helicopter, fly them somewhere where they put a catheter up into their heart and opened up the artery. We didn't exercise the bad energy by like singing to trees and having a seance. We
Yeah.
did real medicine to help those people. We don't need someone like her. She and her brother, he's also a wellness influencer, former food lobbyist, who
Yeah.
wrote a book and profited off of their bizarre health views, and now kind of taking that to the Surgeon General's office. I hope it doesn't last, but we'll see.
But the scary part of it is that it will cause a brain drain in our public health infrastructure, and that's
Yeah,
one piece of this, because you have the goofballs and the wackos and whatnot coming in all these different positions, and of course they have their orbits of goofballs and wackos that they want to staff around them. That the career folks who are there, maybe they're a few years from retirement, maybe they have offers in the private sector. They're just not going to put up with this business. And the thing
they're
that I
not.
get concerned about is what happens if another pandemic comes our way. I've often said on my show, and I've said it to other people, that the RFK Junior cabinet selection to me is arguably the most dangerous one of them all,
Right, right.
because of we just came out of this pandemic. We should have learned these lessons already.
We should have, and
Yeah.
basically we're giving a nod to weird conspiracy theories, giving a nod to non-medical views in healthcare. I will tell people, and I will try to encourage people, like your physician, my wife's a family doctor, I'm an emergency doc. Like we are still practicing evidence-based medicine, right? That is our job. The vast majority of
Yeah.
doctors out there are doing that. The problem is yeah, the infrastructure and the big sounding board of the U.S. government is kind of stating these views that go are antithetical to what we're trying to do. And my wife is a family doc. Every day in the office has conversations about vaccines that people got their information from some uncle on Facebook. Well, now they're going to get it from hhs.gov. That's a real problem,
And they're
that
talking
is going to pervade that information stream.
and they're talking about taking fluoride out of water. I mean,
Yeah.
these are basic things that we all
Yeah.
grew up with. You mentioned you're about this, we're the same age. This is all stuff that we grew up with. You got your
Yeah.
shots when you went to public school. You had fluoride in your water in most places. Like these were just sort of given things. And
Yeah.
now it's been thrown to the lions of and the conspiracy theorists.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's troubling. I agree with you. I think this is a very dangerous pick. I think maybe Hegseth's 1A, 1B, who knows? But that's
Maybe I might agree with that. Sure.
not my area of expertise. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think when we're messing around with people's health, when he hires a guy like David Geyer, who basically had the Maryland Medical Board charge him with practicing without a license for giving treatments to kids with autism that weren't medically sound. And
Yeah.
now he is supposedly heading up this task force that's going to figure out what's causing autism when this guy has already done fake articles saying it's vaccines that do it. And RFK Jr. has said it's vaccines. I think that's incredibly dangerous. I think measles outbreak in Texas that has spread is incredibly dangerous, and I hope not foretelling years to come where we have bigger outbreaks. I've never seen measles. I've had a couple of cases of unvaccinated kids that we did test, and we had them go isolate. Fortunately, they ended up being negative. Haven't seen that yet as a practicing physician, but we fully expect to, right? And so
Yeah.
we're all going back and doing our continuing education, learning about diseases like polio, like measles that we thought we got rid of. And now they're making a comeback. And you can only say this is because of people like RFK Jr. And now he's taken it to a bigger stage.
Yeah, and I mean, here's another example. This is in the Associated Press today, and on Trump's pick for Surgeon General, she wrote in a recent book that people should consider using unproven psychedelic drugs as therapy, and in a newsletter suggested her use of mushrooms helped her find a romantic partner. I'm reading
Like
from the AP.
I don't
Yeah.
I don't know I have nothing to say about that. Like that's great. That's great. If she wants to use mushrooms for romance, I think that's
Yeah,
great.
but
Good
don't
for
we
her. Again,
learn in
don't be Surgeon
basic
General.
Yeah, don't we learn in basic science that some things can be coincidental? You know what I mean? It's
Yeah,
sort of like
sure. Yeah.
that whole thing where people said, I got the COVID shot and then I had the flu or then I got COVID. It's like, well, you might have simultaneously, like things can happen I thought I learned this and I'm not a
Yes.
scientist, I'm
Yeah.
not a
Yeah.
biologist or
Yeah. Correlation
immunologist.
does
So,
not equal causation, is what we say. Just because things happen around the same time doesn't mean that one caused the other. Again, my patient having a heart attack, I just saw the other day on Mother's Day, a mother who was doing the dishes and then developed chest pain. Guess what? Doing the dishes didn't cause the heart attack, although I helped her convince her husband that maybe that was the case and maybe she'll get out of that for a while.
yeah,
But yeah, that didn't cause it, right? It was genetic risk factors. It was everything else that does do that. And we
yeah,
know how to modify those risk factors. If someone like Casey Means were involved, they might say, okay, well, go home and just don't do the dishes, and maybe this won't happen again. Maybe it'll be
yeah,
okay. I don't think that's what we should expect. Another part of her past that really troubles me that I haven't seen reported as much is her views on contraceptives. She's gone
yeah,
on and on about how contraceptives somehow impair women's ability to have babies. They do allow women to control when they have a family, right? And then when women go off of oral contraceptives, they are able to get pregnant. The American
yeah,
College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists has stated this clearly. Research has shown it. And yet she was on Tucker Carlson just last year spewing about this and
wow.
creating this disinformation that might frighten women from using this proven, safe, effective tool to manage their desire when they have families. It
Hmm.
goes on and on. I feel
Well,
like there's no part of medicine she hasn't touched with these crazy ideas.
yeah, it really worries me as just like a layman, that we're going to be in a position now where the next pandemic that comes along, we're just going to be woefully unprepared and we're going to have the wrong
Yeah,
people in all these important positions. The last time around, we had Dr. Fauci, we had Debbie Birx, we
yeah,
had some good people in there,
real people.
and
Yeah.
not this time around. But
And
Dr.
now
Rob
the
Davidson,
work,
yeah, what's
well,
that?
just real quick, the work they're
Yeah,
doing to dismantle Medicaid and potentially kick 7 to 10 million people off of healthcare, the kind of the lower income folks, the people most at risk, if we have another pandemic, people who
exactly.
maybe they don't want to cover vaccines as routine care, and these people don't get vaccines because they heard it from RFK Junior or Casey Means. Now they get measles, now they get polio, and now they don't have health coverage. Like it's a double whammy. They're bringing it from every angle, and that's partly why I'm coming on your show and talking to whoever I can.
Yeah,
Why we started a podcast, Paging America, to talk about this. Why the Committee to Protect
fantastic.
Healthcare does this work. All of that, I think, and I appreciate you using this platform to help talk about this issue.
Well, check out Dr. Rob Davidson's podcast, Paging America. We can find you on Substack. We can find you on all the socials. And always appreciate you talking to us. And I always learn something. So thank you so much. I can't believe we almost said good humors, bad humors at the exact same time.
Oh my gosh, yeah, like good minds, right? Think alike. But yeah, anytime, happy
Exactly.
to come back and great to talk to you again.
Great, great. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Dr. Rob. Really appreciate
Bye-bye.
it. Great stuff. Always enjoy talking to him. And it's interesting. You talk to folks like Dr. Rob and others, who are just fixtures during the COVID pandemic. I mean, people forget how much we relied on their expertise. Thank God we had people like that back in those days. Because, I mean, you just need that kind of expertise in our lives. You can't have just people going around saying, well, I put some butter on it and, everything is okay. All right, next I'm going to bring in Congressman Jared Moskowitz. And there's Congressman Moskowitz right there. Congressman, good to see you.
What's going on, Jim? How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing all right. It takes time. I describe it as the Substack machine, but somewhere I think in San Francisco, there's about like 1,000 squirrels spinning in a wheel furiously to power the
Hamsters,
Substack
Jim. It's
machine.
hamsters.
Hamsters. And but glad we got you up here on the program. Really appreciate it. How are you doing?
I'm fine. Why? Is something going on?
What a time to be alive.
What are you
Uh,
not entertained, Jim?
my goodness. Well, if we could all get a free plane from the Qataris, that would be one thing. But when it's just Donald Trump, that's an
I mean,
entirely
can
different
you
matter.
imagine for a second, like just to take an out of body experience? Can you imagine for a second if Barack Obama had accepted a plane from the Qataris? I mean, they would be calling it the Barack Hussein plane. Okay, I mean, you like the terrorist memes and jokes that they would be telling would be endless.
Yeah,
Okay, you would think a meteor had hit the world. Okay, and we were at an extinction level event.
yeah.
Um,
Well, we
you know,
might get there.
yeah,
We,
but
we're only 100
here,
days in, but yeah,
we're draining the swamp, And yet, the swampiest thing I have ever seen in my entire life, the person who literally wrote the memo that said this was fine, was a former lobbyist for Qatar.
Exactly.
Okay?
I know you can't make this stuff up. And so that begs the question, what can be done about this? And I suppose there's not a whole hell of a lot. I mean, I was saying in my program yesterday, I'll say it again today, and I know it's pointless to ask this question, but where are the Republicans on all of this? I saw Ted Cruz made some comments. When you've lost Ted Cruz, I suppose you might be in a world of hurt. But
Well, look, they
there's just
lost
been
Laura
no
Loomer.
appetite to take them on.
They lost Laura Loomer on it. They lost Ben
Yeah.
Shapiro on it, right? Eric Erickson and Josh Hawley said some stuff. Rick Scott said he was uncomfortable with it. There were more Republicans who have called this out than anything else so far
Mm,
that the administration has done. But let's just run through it real quick, right? So
yeah.
747 800 series, $400 million plane that he's getting from Qatar. Going to cost at least $500 million to retrofit it to turn into Air Force One. Will take several years. Okay, maybe it'll be ready by the time Trump leaves office. Interesting. We're finally getting like some sort of admittance that he's leaving office. That's good
Yeah.
news. The Qataris
That's
brought
true.
that out. Thank you to them.
Maybe
It
we
only
should
took a
give him the free
400.
plane to leave office. Maybe
That's right.
that's the
100%.
enticement. You have it waiting for him on the tarmac at Joint Base Andrews.
That's exactly right. But then it's saying, well, it's a gift to the United States that will then go to his library. A library is going to take 5 years to build. He's going to fly
Yeah.
this freaking thing,
Oh yeah.
okay? But before then, so this is all about replacing his aging 767, I think is what he flies now.
Yeah.
So
The one that looked really dated back in the 2000s. That one, I think.
yes, but
Yes.
look, it's a flying palace. It's a flying palace, Jim.
I
Okay.
gotta. We
They
gotta
want
tackle.
nothing in return. Nothing. I mean,
No,
even a
yeah.
Jewish mother would be like, "Here's your $400 million plane. You have to come for dinner."
You got to do something in return. No, but here's the question. I mean, the national security implications of all of this. I mean, Donald Trump himself has accused Qatar of funding and supporting
Yep.
terrorism. I'm wondering what the Israelis would think of a Qatari donated plane landing in Tel Aviv for a POTUS trip. I mean, that to me sounds like something that would uh, not go over well with the Israelis. I mean, the national security implications of all this are important too.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the
Yeah,
whole plane's gonna have to be swept and taken apart and all of that. But
yeah,
let's think about other countries out there. I'm not even thinking about the Israelis for a second. I'm sure they're very much taken aback about what's going on. But
yeah.
if you're Putin, you're thinking to yourself, let's get the guy a yacht, right? We have
Exactly.
oligarchs here that have yachts. Let's give him one of the yachts. Or hey, when we're
Yeah.
chopping up Ukraine, let's create like a little Trump area, like an amusement park in Ukraine, and give that to him. I mean, other countries are now like, what can we give the president?
Yeah, I know it's true. It's sort of like I was on with Charlie Sykes earlier today, and it reminded me of one of those game shows where you run through the supermarket with your shopping cart and you just pile as many, goodies in your shopping cart in 60 seconds. He seems to be doing that across the Middle East right now. But I do want to ask you, since you are in the House and you can do something about this, the big beautiful bill in Medicaid, because Dr. Rob Davidson was just talking about this a few moments ago, and how the cuts coming to Medicaid could be staggering and potentially really cripple the healthcare system in this country. Any thoughts on that? And what about this bill? I mean, do you see it in its current incarnation or wherever we are in the sausage making process ever really getting to Donald Trump's desk? I mean, it seems to me the Senate's going to take a meat axe to it.
Well, look, I don't know where it will wind up when the House will vote for it. It's clear that the Senate's clearly going to change it, so they're going to make a bunch of their members here who will probably cave because we've seen them capitulate over and it's capitulation season
Yeah,
here in
that's
the House
true.
of Representatives. So
Yeah.
let's see who stands up and if they have the votes to pass it. But look, this is everything the Democrats have been saying for the last several months. They're going to cut Medicaid by about $800 billion, and that's exactly what's happening. Even though Donald Trump has made a pledge not to cut Medicaid.
Yes.
And so, look, they say one thing, they do another. And so these cuts would be devastating. It would kick millions of people off health insurance in order to pay tax cuts for billionaires and millionaires. And I want to be clear. That's an easy talking point. I want to give you the data. Okay. The old tax rate used to be 39. Okay. This reduction took it down to 37.6.
Hmm.
Okay. So we're not talking about taxes like going up in dramatic fashion. We're talking about a point and a half, like almost 2 points,
Yeah.
right, of it going up. But we're going to take that money from the poorest among us. And in order to give that tax cut, we're then going to add $3 trillion a year, at least, to our debt. So Donald Trump will have added more than $10 trillion to our debt for the life of the first tax cut and then the renewal of the tax cut. So much for Doge and having to reduce our spending and our
Yeah,
debt and
that
and all of that. The Republican Party is literally they're twisting themselves into pretzels trying to figure out how they're going to sell the American people that they care about spending and driving our country into debt while doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard so many members on the Republican side talk about how they care about debt and deficits, and this will obviously blow a huge hole in the budget for this country and drive up the debt. I did want to ask you about this since you mentioned Doge. I did look this up. You just said the other day that the Doge caucus is dead, it's defunct. We
First of
haven't
all,
met
Jim,
in months.
don't talk ill of the dead. Okay, all
Is
right.
it, this is not like the Princess Bride, it's mostly
It's
dead.
fresh. We're still in the mourning period.
What
Okay.
happened? I mean, it seems Doge is dead. The Doge caucus is dead. I mean, that just didn't work out, I guess.
Well, I mean, look. So let me separate it. Elon, had the Doge committee out of the executive branch. He did such a great job. He had to leave to save his company, Tesla. Okay, but in the caucus, which I joined because one, I do think there's waste in government. Two, I think we can make stuff more efficient. Okay, and so I joined. I didn't want to just give the Republicans that lane, and so I did go and make it bipartisan. But the caucus is dead. It's defunct. It met twice in 5 months. We weren't included in the process. Okay, Elon and the executive branch did everything without Congress, and that was also a failure. They said they were going to find $1 trillion. They only found 160 billion, if I use their math, which I think is wrong. Okay, so that means they didn't find 85% of what they were looking for. So that's a failure. Okay, and the last word of Doge is efficiency. The E. Did they not forget that? They've not made a single department more efficient. Go ask Newark. Okay, that's what
Yeah.
Doge accomplished. Okay, so all they did was they
I
cut
guess it gets more
people.
efficient if nobody wants to fly. But anyway,
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, they cut people, they cut programs. Some of that's now being
Mm.
restored. So the caucus, which is made up of members here in Congress, Democrats and Republicans, it's dead. We were not included. It has no
Hmm.
record of accomplishment.
That's amazing. And one of the things they have been doing with the federal government, and but my God, it may cause disasters we haven't really contemplated as of this point. I mean, Trump is trying to get rid of FEMA, and this is an area where you have some expertise. I mean, you ran emergency management in Florida, and he just dismissed the acting federal emergency management agency head the other day, Cameron Hamilton, and he was basically fired for saying it would not be in the best interest of the American people to eliminate FEMA, which is what Trump and Kristi Noem want to do. So, I mean, what are your thoughts on this, and what might happen? I mean, I think I know what might happen. What do you think might happen if this actually happens?
Of all the things that are being discussed now and not being discussed, this is one that's flying below the radar that would be catastrophic. Okay. First of all, FEMA needs reform. I'll give the president credit about one thing. He's right that FEMA needs reform. And he started talking about reform before he started talking about removal. And so we've known FEMA's needed reform for years in the emergency management industry. That reform is getting it out of Homeland. Okay, Homeland's become too big, too bureaucratic. They got FEMA running all sorts of grants for immigration they shouldn't be involved in. And as a result, FEMA's gotten away from its core business of response and recovery. So for 3 years now, I've had a bill to get FEMA out of Homeland. And in fact, I have a bill now with Byron Donalds, who Republican running for governor,
Hmm.
endorsed by Donald Trump. He's on my bill, as is Tom Tillis in the Senate, to get FEMA out of Homeland. Okay, and we can talk about block grants to give states more buy-in. But
Yeah.
this idea of getting rid of FEMA, let me explain something to you. Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, that border the Gulf of America. Okay, yeah, I slipped that in. Okay,
Sorry. Yeah.
if a Category 4
He's kidding,
storm came,
folks. Yeah.
if a Category 4 storm came in from the Gulf and there was no FEMA, those states would be bankrupt. Okay,
Yeah.
they wouldn't be able to afford that disaster, let alone have the resources that FEMA coordinates, because FEMA brings resources from other departments. And so, look, I think this FEMA debate, there's a disconnect in the White House between people in the executive and people in Homeland. And I'm being honest, I think there are 3 buckets of people looking at this. I think there are the people who are sane, I think the people who are insane, and then I think there are the people who are clinically insane.
Yeah.
Okay, and unfortunately, that last bucket seems to be the bucket that is in Homeland trying to eliminate FEMA. It's why you don't see a lot of members of Congress coming out and talking about the elimination of FEMA. By the way, the speaker's from Louisiana. The majority leader, Scalise, is from Louisiana. Okay, it would be terrible for those states, and even Florida and Texas. Okay, they would fare better, but they also couldn't survive without FEMA. But that
Well, I
doesn't
was going to
mean
say, aren't these all red states that would get hosed?
yes,
I mean,
it would
I
hurt red
covered
states more
Hurricane
than blue states.
I
Yes,
covered Hurricane Katrina, and if if you had no FEMA, I mean, FEMA failed spectacularly after Hurricane Katrina. But even if you had no FEMA back then, that would have been even an even worse situation because those folks were just in dire straits, and you can't count on a state that's just been wiped out to go in there with block grants to figure out the problem. It's just you need a federal response.
what Kristi Noem has done to FEMA so far, I think we could see another Michael Brown moment,
Mm,
okay, in which FEMA fails in hurricane season. Okay, I'm extremely worried about the damage that has happened under her leadership there to an agency that, quite frankly, she didn't have to use a lot when she was governor.
mm.
But there are governors of red states that understand how important FEMA is. So reform it, don't eliminate it.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing I want to get into before we let you go, and I appreciate all the time you've given us, is, and this is something I have to bring up with every Democratic lawmaker, and that is, where do you think the party should go from here right now? There's a new AP poll out that says that Democrats are frustrated, found that only about one-third of Democrats are very optimistic or even somewhat optimistic about their party's future. It seems like Dems are kind of down in the dumps. They don't know how to get out of this. People have varying degrees. I mean, you're very upbeat. You're very funny.
That's the
Um,
caffeine.
yeah, that's the caffeine. That's the Red Bull kicking in, which is great. For a member, I've seen a lot of them in recent days falling asleep during hearings, but not Jared Moskowitz. But your thoughts on this? Are you concerned about it? Do you see leaders out there who you think are taking the party in the right direction? I'm asking you because you seem to be kind of a younger, whippersnapper type congressman up there on Capitol, if I may say
Well,
so.
well,
I'm
well. Look,
slightly older.
I think you can take bits and pieces from all of this and cobble it up, right? We're seeing this
Yeah,
big debate go on, like from David Hogg and James Carville, right? I think they're
yeah,
both right, right? I think they're both right. I think David Hogg saying we need more messengers, better messengers. I think he's correct on that. But to
yeah,
be honest, we don't need better progressive messengers. We have tons of those. What we need more messengers in the center and moderate, right, to appeal to these folks that are in Trump districts that we got to win, or D+2 districts like mine, right? That it's barely a Democratic seat. But I also think James Carville is right that it's about winning elections. That's
yeah,
what we have to do. We have to win elections. And so Democrats should be frustrated. They should be outraged. What's happening is ridiculous. We helped us get here by Joe Biden not jumping out of the race earlier.
yeah,
Okay, there's no doubt that this is partly our fault for letting that go on too long. And we have to own that. And I think that's why our approval rating is down. I think the American people know after they saw that debate that the Democratic Party wasn't telling the truth about Joe Biden. I think there's a lot of hangover about that. And we're blamed for Donald Trump's resurrection.
yeah,
But at the same time, Jim, we can't get into a purity fight. Meaning, we
yeah,
can't all of a sudden look for the most pure of the most pure of the most pure, and all of a sudden we can't win elections in the 20 seats that are going to decide whether Hakeem Jeffries becomes Speaker. Making him Speaker is the most important thing.